The first thing I noticed was not my wife's tears. It was the silence. For 43 years, whenever I came home from work, Eleanor met me at the front door. Sometimes she was holding a dish towel, sometimes a cup of coffee. Sometimes she simply smiled and asked, "Long day?" That smile had carried me through layoffs over time, raising a child and burying both of our parents. But that Tuesday evening, the front door was unlocked. The television was loud, and nobody came to greet me. My name is Walter Jennings. I am 69 years old, and for 38 years, I worked maintenance for the city of Lexington, Kentucky. I fixed broken water lines in winter, patched school roofs in July heat, and rarely missed a day unless a doctor ordered me to stay home. I believed in three things: work, marriage, family. That evening, all three were about to collide. I walked into the living room carrying my metal lunchbox. My son Derek sat on the couch laughing. His wife Melissa was scrolling through her phone beside him. Pizza boxes covered my coffee table. My late father's recliner had been pushed against the wall to make room for the sectional Melissa ordered without asking. Neither of them stood. Then I saw Eleanor. She was sitting alone at the dining table. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes were red. She wiped them the moment she saw me. "Hi," she whispered. I crossed the room and kissed her forehead. "What happened?" She looked toward Derek, then Melissa, then back at me. "Please," she whispered, "don't ask." Those three words frightened me more than shouting would have. Eleanor had never been afraid to tell me the truth. Derek stood quickly. "Dad, Mom's just emotional." Melissa gave a small laugh. "She gets upset over little things." "Little things?" I looked back at my wife. Her hands were trembling. Not enough for a stranger to notice. Enough for me. That night, Eleanor barely ate. Melissa and Derek ordered dinner for themselves. Eleanor reheated leftover soup and sat at the end of the table while they watched television. I wanted to demand answers. But love teaches patience too, so I waited. Around midnight, I woke up thirsty. As I walked downstairs, I heard voices from the living room. Derek and Melissa thought we were asleep. Melissa said, "Do you think she'll tell your dad?" My son laughed. "No, she'll never tell Dad." I stopped on the stairs. Melissa giggled. I thought she was actually going to cry. "Oh, she did," Derek said, "but Mom would never ruin the family." Then Melissa said, "Oh, good." I stood in the darkness until their laughter stopped. When I returned to bed, Eleanor was awake. I took her hand. She squeezed mine. Neither of us spoke. The next morning, I left for work at the usual time. At least they believed I did. Instead, I parked 3 streets away and walked home through the alley. The garage door was partly open. As I stepped inside, I heard Melissa talking in the kitchen. "I can't believe she apologized." Derek laughed. "I told you, she thinks everything is her fault." Then his voice became colder. "As long as Dad doesn't know, we're fine." I stepped into the kitchen. Neither saw me at first. Melissa was drinking coffee. Derek was staring at his phone. Finally, Melissa looked up. Her face emptied. "Walter?" Derek spun around. "I thought you were at work." "I forgot something." They both waited. I looked at my son. "What did you do to my wife?" Silence. Derek rubbed the back of his neck. He had done that since childhood whenever he lied. "It wasn't a big deal." "What wasn't?" Melissa folded her arms. "We were trying to help Eleanor become more independent." I looked around the kitchen. Eleanor's favorite coffee mug was missing. The little radio she used every morning was gone. Half her baking supplies had disappeared. Then I saw a notebook on the counter. On the first page, Melissa had written, "House rules, breakfast 7 to 7:20, laundry Tuesday and Friday, kitchen closed after 8 p.m., living room reserved after 6 p.m., personal visitors require approval." At the bottom was another line. "Failure to follow these rules creates unnecessary stress for the household." I held up the notebook. "You wrote this?" Melissa's chin lifted. "We all agreed structure would help." I turned toward Derek. "You agreed?" He looked at the floor. "Mom needs boundaries." Boundaries. The woman who raised him. The woman who sold her wedding bracelet one Christmas so he could get braces. The woman who worked night shifts at a bakery when his college books cost more than we expected. Now she needed permission to make coffee in her own kitchen. Tell me honestly, If your adult child treated your spouse this way, would you throw them out immediately? Comment out today if one act of humiliation would be enough. Comment hear everything if you would first uncover the full truth. I chose to hear everything. I put the notebook back on the counter. Then I smiled. All right, I said. Derek relaxed. Melissa did too. They thought silence meant surrender. That was their mistake. I drove to work, called my supervisor, and used the first personal day I had taken in almost 4 years. Then I called Eleanor's sister, Ruth. Has Eleanor said anything to you? Ruth went quiet. Finally, she said, she made me promise not to tell. My grip tightened around the phone. Tell me now. Over the next 20 minutes, I learned what had been happening while I worked. Melissa had started calling Eleanor forgetful. She moved Eleanor's belongings into the garage. She told guests Eleanor was declining. She made her ask before using the washing machine because Melissa said she wasted water. And the previous afternoon she had accused Eleanor of stealing money from her purse. $20. Eleanor denied it. Derek searched his mother's handbag anyway. The money was later found under Melissa's car seat. But instead of apologizing, Melissa told Eleanor she had probably placed it there and forgotten. Then Derek laughed. That was why my wife had been crying. Not because of $20, because her own son searched her handbag like she was a thief. I went home early. Eleanor was alone in the bedroom folding clothes. I closed the door and placed the house rules notebook on the bed. Her face changed. I heard them, I said. She looked down. I didn't want you fighting with Derek. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice broke. Because he's our son. I sat beside her. He stopped acting like one. Then she told me the rest. Derek and Melissa had moved into our house 6 months earlier, after his contracting business failed. They claimed it was temporary. I paid their car insurance, covered 2 loan payments, bought groceries, helped them avoid bankruptcy. And while I worked, they slowly took control of our home. Eleanor tolerated it because she believed Derek was ashamed and hurting. But mercy had become permission. That afternoon I called our attorney, Miriam Cole. She had prepared our estate documents 12 years earlier. When I explained what had happened, she said, Walter, do you still have the occupancy agreement Derek signed? I had forgotten about it. When they moved in, Miriam insisted they sign a temporary residency agreement. Derek laughed at the time. Dad, you really think you need paperwork with your own son? Apparently I did. The agreement stated that their right to stay could be terminated immediately for harassment, intimidation, financial exploitation, or interference with our use of the home. But Miriam found something worse. Derek had used our address to apply for another business loan. On the application, he listed himself as a partial owner of the house. He had even estimated its value. My son was not just disrespecting us. He was trying to borrow against a home he did not own. Now I want to ask you another question. Was Derek worse than Melissa because he was my son and knew better? Comment Derek if betrayal by your own child is the greater wound. Comment Melissa if the person creating the cruelty carries the most blame. The next morning, everything changed. At 7:30, 2 certified envelopes sat on the kitchen table. One for Derek, one for Melissa. Beside them was the house rules notebook. They came downstairs together. Melissa opened her envelope first. Her face tightened. What is this? A notice to vacate, I said. Derek tore open his. You're throwing us out? I'm ending your permission to stay. Dad, this is our home too. No, Eleanor said from behind me. Her voice was quiet, but steady. This was never your home to control. Melissa turned toward her. You're doing this because of yesterday. Eleanor looked directly at her. No, yesterday only proved what you had already become. Then the doorbell rang. Miriam entered with a representative from the bank. Derek's face went pale. The bank representative placed a folder on the table. Mr. Jennings, we need clarification regarding a loan application listing this property as security. Melissa stared at Derek. What loan? He said nothing. That silence destroyed the last of their unity. Melissa began asking questions. How much? Why had he hidden it? What had he signed? Derek tried to blame the business. Then me. Then stress. But every excuse sounded smaller than the one before it. I looked at my son. You searched your mother's handbag over $20 while trying to use her house for a loan. The room went silent. Eleanor stepped forward. Derek could not meet her eyes. She said, I would have given you $20. His face collapsed. That was the sentence that broke him. Not the eviction, not the bank, not the loan. The realization that the woman he humiliated would still have helped him if he had only asked. They moved out within 10 days. Melissa went to stay with her mother. Derek rented a room near his job. The bank rejected the loan and opened a fraud review, but because I confirmed no money had been released, the matter ended with warnings, fees, and a permanent record that would follow his business applications. I did not rescue him. For the first time in his life, I let the full weight remain where it belonged. The day after they left, Eleanor and I brought her belongings back inside. Her radio returned to the kitchen. Her baking supplies went back into the pantry. My father's recliner returned beside the window. Then Eleanor tore the house rules page into small pieces and dropped them into the trash. She looked at me and smiled. A real smile. The first one I had seen in weeks. Derek came back 3 months later. Alone, he stood on the porch holding Eleanor's coffee mug. He had found it in one of Melissa's boxes. I'm sorry, he said. I waited. This time he did not apologize generally. He named everything. Searching her handbag, laughing, staying quiet while Melissa insulted her, lying on the loan application, treating our love like access instead of a gift. Eleanor listened through the screen door. Then she said, An apology opens the door. It does not erase what happened inside. He nodded. I understand. We did not invite him in that day, but he came back the next Sunday. Then the Sunday after that, he started paying back what he owed, slowly. No excuses. No promises about inheritance, just actions. I still work 3 days a week, though retirement is finally close. And every evening when I come home, Eleanor meets me at the door again, sometimes with a dish towel, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing but that smile. My son believed she would never tell me. He was right about one thing. She did not. I heard him say it himself. And sometimes the truth does not need to be confessed.